to our program now from the National Right to Life, Susan Muskett. Susan is Senior Legislative Counsel, and wanted to have Susan on to talk about what's going on with respect to the life issue nationally, and maybe she can give us some news about some states around the country. Susan, good morning to you.
Good morning.
I'm Tim with Ed. We thank you for being on with us.
It's my pleasure.
Hey, first of all, well, the National Right to Life, you guys been there for a long time, haven't you?
We sure have. We were first established back in 1968. So this is, we've been around fighting the good fight for many, many years.
Even before Roe versus Wade?
Even before Roe versus Wade. That's exactly correct.
Well, your constituency, I don't know, do you know, is it mostly Catholic, or is it Catholic and Protestant both, or?
It's Catholic, Protestant. I'm sure we probably even have some people who don't subscribe to any particular faith.
Right.
We welcome anyone who's willing to fight to protect human life, innocent human life, both at the beginning and the end stages of life.
All right, talk to me about or talk to Ed too. He's here too. He's not a potted plant. So Ed,
some days I am, Susan. But today
some days you want to be a potted plant, don't you? But talk to us about Obamacare for just a moment, because just to refresh people's memories, Obamacare was passed by the Democrats without a single Republican vote. It was, and included in that was the mandate that that employers provide for their employees abortifacients and contraception as part of the employee package. Now, the contraception issue got a lot of play in the media. Very little play did the abortifacients article. I mean, part of the mandate get attention, but we just filed a lawsuit here at American Family Association, as a lot of other companies and ministries have, against Obamacare on these grounds. We don't want to be forced by the government to pay for abortifacients as part of our group insurance policy. So where does this stand, Susan, or can you update us?
Well, that's still being fought out in the courts. You know, there's some 50 lawsuits, and they're going through the courts, and people expect that eventually it'll get to the U.S. Supreme Court. But that authority is very broad. In fact, it could be used by the Obama administration at some point in the future to actually even mandate coverage of surgical abortions and at least some health plans. When Obamacare was going through, you know, there was an effort to try to get the sponsor of this language to exempt a requirement that surgical abortion could be required, and she refused to do so. So that language is broad, and again, it's one of the big problems with Obamacare, in addition to any number of other problems.
Well, now, Susan, I want to confess before the entire nation that I have not read the Affordable Care Act, like many members of Congress. So I'm going to ask you a question and risk showing my ignorance. Does this law, it seems to me I've read that this law does not itself mandate that companies pay for or make sure that they, through their health care provisions for their employees, mandates the provision of contraceptives and abortifacients, but instead that the law gives Kathleen Sebelius, head of Health and Human Services, the right to make the regulations for this, and she's the one, and Health and Human Services is the one that has made this provision. Have I understood that properly?
That's correct. The language talks about that the plans have to cover preventive services, and that would be the preventive services that are designated by HHS. And so that's why I'm saying it's so broad that at a future date, all she has to do is say, okay, now I've decided that surgical abortions, or through her agency, HHS, decides that surgical abortions are now a preventive service that plans have to cover. So you're correct. It's the law is written very broadly, and then HHS takes it and says, these are the items that we believe are preventive services that must be covered.
Well, now, you're senior legislative counsel for National Right to Life, so you're an attorney.
Yes.
So do you think this provision that HHS is foisting upon companies and, well, groups like ours, do you think that this is going to pass legal muster in terms of the First Amendment?
Well, in my opinion, it's a clear violation of the First Amendment. But as you all know, what is expected of courts doesn't necessarily always take place. We have a lot of judicial activists in the courts who have their own agendas. So unfortunately, what would be the normal expected decision doesn't necessarily come down when you have activists on the courts.
We're talking to Susan Muskett. What about Hobby Lobby? What's the situation with them?
Well, they are still going through the courts and trying to hopefully prevail. But, I am not a litigator, so I have not actually, been litigating their cases. But they are another one of the plaintiffs that's trying to ensure that their First Amendment rights are protected.
Well, I'll tell you what, Hobby Lobby has now they're running the risk of having to pay up to $1 million a day penalty
if they lose this case.
If they lose the case, my understanding, they have not had any out-of-pocket, fines yet.
Right.
But they're challenging the federal government. They're challenging Obamacare on this matter, not as a Christian ministry, but as a Christian-run business, saying, "Hey, this violates our religious principles, and we shouldn't be forced to do this to pay for abortifacients."
Yeah. So that's kind of even a harder task. I mean, it seems like it's a slam dunk for groups like ours that are Christian. Right. We're nonprofits. But Susan, I mean, a company like Hobby Lobby that's a business owned by Christians, I can see where they would really be in danger with the strength of the secular movement in this country.
I mean, when a person of faith sets up their own business, they shouldn't have to lose their First Amendment rights, and that's what the administration's arguing, and that's not true. If you're a person of faith and you want to help create jobs for other people and set up a business, you shouldn't have to, like I said, let's say in the future, if the Obama administration was to mandate coverage of surgical abortions, why should you have to provide coverage for surgical abortions to your employees just because you want to set up your own private business? It's just not what our country was founded on.
Talking to Susan Muskett from the National Right to Life. She's Senior Legislative Counsel. Give us some good news. What's going on out there?
The good news, I can tell you some good news.
All right, give it to us.
I'll start with kind of a little bit of the background. One of Obamacare's big schemes is to make federally subsidized abortion insurance commonly available in the United States. And they do this by setting up a big new program to make federal premium subsidies available to tens of millions of families. OMB has projected that these subsidies could cost $478 billion from 2014 to 21. Now, the good news is that although these subsidies can be used to purchase plans that cover all abortions, Obamacare specifically said that states can prohibit abortion coverage in the plans and their exchanges. And 21 states have done this. So by these 21 states passing these opt-out laws, they're ensuring that at least within their state's exchange, the Obamacare scheme to fund abortion insurance is not taking effect in their state's exchange.
Well, so how easy, and again, here's what I like to do. When someone brings some good news, I like to throw a wet blanket on it. So let me just ask you, maybe you have a good answer here, a good news answer. How easy would it be for HHS, Health and Human Services, to shut that opportunity for these states? Does HHS have the authority to say, oh, it's a little oversight, what we're going to say is, yes, you must set up these exchanges, but you cannot do so in a manner that circumvents our desire to force companies to provide abortions?
No, they cannot, because when Obamacare passed, it has clear statutory language that says these states can opt out and can prohibit abortion in exchanges.
Oh, okay, good.
Plus, it has language that says that Obamacare cannot overrule a state law regarding abortion. So clearly, this opt-out language applies regardless of whether the state sets up their own exchange or whether they're allowing the federal government to administer the exchange.
We're talking to Susan Muskett, Senior Legislative Counsel for the National Right to Life.